All right, welcome back, everybody. My name is Jack Paisley, and this is the Sports Casual. It's big weekend in sports for us here in America. Uh, let's start with some college football news. So obviously, the big storyline from this last week was that it was the Heisman Trophy award ceremony, and it was mainly two guys kind of battling it out for the Heisman in my eyes this year, and that was Travis Hunter from University of Colorado, the dual threat receiver and cornerback, known for playing under Deion Sanders prime time, versus Ashton Genty out of Boise State, the big running back. And Travis Hunter ended up coming away with the award this year. And there was a lot of uproar about this, and I don't really understand why. The big argument was that Ashton Genty was the best running back in college football this year. Everybody was like, "This is the second greatest running back season that we've ever seen. This kid's got to be the Heisman sure thing. There's no reason that you wouldn't give it to him." And I think the key phrase in that whole sentence is second best. Like they were comparing him against Barry Sanders, and in my opinion, Ashton Genty was not better than Barry Sanders this year. Therefore, the word second best, or part of that, the second best, is the reason that he was not selected. Travis Hunter is the best we've seen at this kind of dual threat cornerback, wide receiver, skilled player that I've frankly ever seen in my lifetime. The closest was probably Charles Woodson back in the day. Um, but you really can't compare him to anything. The closest was maybe Jabril Peppers a couple years ago out of Michigan, was the super crazy punt returner, kick returner, and safety, who's obviously now, I believe, he's still playing for the Patriots, if memory serves, or the Jets. But that there's really only two players that you can compare Travis Hunter to within recent memory. Uh, Obviously, he was an amazing cover cornerback, great ball skills, and just kind of a shutdown guy. Didn't get a lot of balls thrown his way. And then he was clearly a very productive wide receiver, especially with Shador throwing him the ball. In my opinion, there was no reason that you would not give Travis Hunter this award. We have not seen anything like him for a long time. The I thought he was going to be a sure-in. The closer we got to the actual award ceremony, people started like nitpicking and finding reasons to not give him. They started saying that he's the media's pick for the Heisman, but the real people's champion was Ashton Genty. And I thought they were just trying to give him basically shit for no reason. I did not think it was a close race. Like, he is literally the most valuable player in college football this year, outside of a quarterback, just based off of the positional value. It's not even close. The dude played like 300 to 400 more snaps than the next closest eligible player, which is probably more. That's like a whole extra game, if not more. That I thought it was crazy that anybody was trying to take that away from Travis, but congrats to him. Congrats to the University of Colorado. You could not have started Deion Sanders' coaching career any better out there. Revive that program from a joke in college football as well as in the state of Colorado, and has now he's gonna have two first round draft picks in Shador and then Travis, but also the first Heisman Trophy in the program's history in a long time. Uh, that props to Deion Sanders. He's responsible for bringing that Heisman Trophy, and that caliber of player to a school that no one would have ever, you know, thought that he would ever go to. If you tell me the number one prospect in the state of freaking Colorado would go to CU, I would not believe you. Let alone the country, which is what Travis was. So, congrats to them. I'm excited to see if he can continue his success at Colorado now that Shador and Travis are going to be leaving. They got that big time 5-star quarterback recruit coming, so hopefully he can keep the success going, because it's definitely fun to talk about and see happen at a school like CU. And then the other college football news, that broke late last week was Bill Belichick officially signed with the University of North Carolina to be their next football coach. And I don't really see this going very well, to be honest. I'm sure he's going to have a lot of say in the kind of players that they're signing. Um, and we saw what happened when you gave Bill that level of control in today's modern game when he was with the Patriots. And if you look at the Patriots organization now, it's a shell of itself. The talent on that team is abysmal compared to other NFL franchises, and I don't really think that having a year away from that is going to change that. The style of football that Bill likes to play, which as a defensive coach is defensive oriented with limited creativity on the offensive side, I don't think is going to be attractive to most star college football players. Bill is not known for being overly friendly and uh, sales oriented, I would say. He's known for being an old school, hard nosed football coach. And I think that you're going to see a lot of those top players consider it just because of his connections within the league. But I don't think that it's going to flip the needle to where North Carolina is going to be a powerhouse within college football. I think you'll see defensive players start going there just because of Bill's prowess with the defensive side of the ball. Offensively, I'd be surprised if he gets anybody of that caliber. I think any of those kids that are going to be that good are still going to be going to the Ohio States, the Alabamas, Clemson's, your typical blue chip stock football programs. I don't think Bill is going to flip the needle to some of these young kids that they caught maybe the end of the Tom Brady era in New Orleans or not New Orleans, uh, wherever the Patriots play, Massachusetts. That's it. That I just don't see it working out long term. I think he's maybe going to do it for a year and see if he can parlay that into an NFL job again and leave that North Carolina job with his son, which is kind of what the reports have been that it's in his contract. But all in all, I just don't think it'll work. But it's definitely a splashy move by my North Carolina. So props to them for trying to flip their program. I think the Drake May kind of hype that came out has definitely kind of flipped their mind, especially because they have not been overly competitive in terms of winning national championships in basketball as much as everybody thinks they have been. So I think they're trying to elevate that and use their donor money, which includes like Michael Jordan and some of those big time former athletes to try to elevate that football program. So I'm excited to see what happens, but I'm very or pessimistic on Bill in college football. I just don't think it's a great fit in terms of his personality and the style of coaching that happens nowadays. And then the other big event from this weekend is going to be there's a fight night out in Tampa for the UFC. With the main event is going to be Colby Covington versus Joaquin Buckley. This is going to be a little bit of less of a casuals fight night because there's a lot of great knockouts and fights on here. Like Cub Swanson, arguably retired. He was a little hazy on the details on whether he was officially retiring or not, but had a walk off, save his butt kind of KO. So hopefully he retires. But the main event was Colby Covington versus Joaquin Buckley. Colby obviously had that interim championship a couple years ago, and then those wars with Kamaru Usman. Since then, he's been on a little bit of a rough patch. Just got his butt whipped by Leon Edwards in his last title fight. That he was fighting the up and coming Joaquin Buckley, who's a knockout artist out of the U.S. Who's just been on a tear. I think he's on like a 6-fight win streak now. Joaquin actually ended up getting the win in this fight. Got stopped in, I believe, the third round. Colby just had a big old cut over one of his eyes. The ringside physician freaked out, which rubbed Dana the right way or the wrong way. He said if this had happened in Vegas, that fight never would have been stopped. I thought it was a decent stoppage. I didn't think it was a particularly close fight. Colby took it on short notice and didn't really look great. Didn't look prepared. I thought it was a bad matchup as well with Joaquin being such a power punching striker, and then Colby's kind of a cardio machine, grinded out wrestling that I thought it didn't really work out for Colby in terms of his style. I think this is kind of going to be the last we talk about Colby Covington in terms of a title contender. I think he's going to start going into that realm of like a Nate Diaz before Nate left the UFC, where he's just going to be kind of the added bonus to a pay-per-view card or maybe a fight night here and there, just because he talks so much shit in the lead up to fights that he makes them a lot personal. And he really does a good job of building up those fights. I think at this point, him being a perennial contender and I believe this is welterweight, I think those days are kind of over in my opinion. Whereas Buckley called out either Leon Edwards or Kamaru Usman or for a title shot. My bet is that they're probably going to give him Leon Edwards, or I mean, I could see the Kamaru fight coming into fruition, but he's Kamaru's rumored to be fighting Jack Della Maddalena in his next fight. So if Kamaru's occupied, I think him or Joaquin Buckley versus Leon Edwards is a great fight. It's a stand up battle of a technician in Leon Edwards who's going to sit on the outside and basically try to pick you apart versus a brawler in Buckley who's just going to try to walk forward and take your head off. That take my money. That sounds like a great fight. If it's going to be Usman, I would still be favoring Buckley. I think Kamaru is just kind of he's getting older, and I think he's kind of leaked out of his prime. He's notorious for having bad knees and just health issues, but he's a Hall of Famer. You can never count him out against anybody. So that'd be another really fun fight that I would probably be favoring Buckley by knockout. But that was kind of the main names on this UFC fight night. It was the last one of the year until we get our pay-per-views and everything for 2025. But it was an interesting way for the UFC to end you know the season, I guess, for 2024. Then moving into NFL football, we're filming this on Monday, so we actually have the dual uh, Monday night football games happening right now. So we're gonna cover kind of what the weekend had in store, and then we can talk a little bit about my thoughts on the matchup and what I think is gonna happen on the Monday night football. But the Chiefs versus the Browns. The big story out of this was the Chiefs got the win, but Patrick Mahomes is hurt. A lot of these top teams are kind of limping into the playoffs this year. That outside of the Bills, a lot of them have big injuries. Whether that's the Chiefs, the Lions got even more hurt this week. That a lot of whoever is going to be good in this playoff series for that, at least for the AFC, is going to be who is healthiest. That a lot of these teams that are nearing that top spot are going to be banged up coming in, and we're trying to see if we can get players back and all that. And I think that this is going to be kind of like it's going to have to be a perfect storm for those Chiefs to come in and win a bunch of games in the playoffs. Even though they're at home, even though they have all the experience in the world, they've not played great this whole season. They've been winning but haven't been playing great, and now they're starting to get banged up, especially at the most important position, which is obviously quarterback. And Mahomes has been nicked pretty much the whole year. For the Browns, I mean they're a tough play for everybody. Obviously, Jameis is arguably the most exciting player in football because he just makes wild decisions. He threw a couple picks this year or this game and ended up getting pulled. But before that, he's willing to make every throw on that field and damn the consequences kind of thing. And then Bengals versus Titans. The Bengals basically need to win out to stay in the AFC title picture. I believe if they lose one more, they're essentially out. But they ended up getting the 37-27 win over the Titans. I still think this is a big area of concern for the Bengals. Like the Titans are not a good team this year, offensively, defensively, basically anywhere. They're not really a great team, and they still put up 27 points against that Bengals defense. Is definitely worrisome for a team that's trying to make that end of year push. That if you put Joe Burrow on the Chiefs, for example, with that defense, he is the runaway MVP candidate for this year. But because that Bengals team has such a bad defense this year, it's basically stopping points from happening. you're relying on Jamar Chase and T Higgins and Joe Burrow to get in these big shootouts every week, and that's just not a very smart way to try to win in the U or the NFL. That I think you're really gonna have to think about firing that DC, restocking that not only O line to help protect Joe, but also that defense through free agency and the draft. I think that's got to be the two areas that you got to really focus on if you're a Bengals fan or coach coming into the next year, because right now it's rough to watch on those two fronts of the ball. And then next was the Saints versus the Commanders. Commanders get the 20-19 win, continuing Jaden Daniels' rookie campaign. I think at this point he's basically locked in that offensive rookie of the year, especially with Bo Nix struggling this game a little bit. Um, he did enough to win. It's really interesting seeing how the Commanders have flipped kind of the narrative around them just in a year with a new coaching staff, obviously the new owners, and then a new quarterback. It just shows how much parity there is in the NFL. That if you would have told most people that Washington was going to be really good this year, they would have laughed at your face. Uh, Basically, coming into this year, they're not known as a good franchise, being operated well with the Schneider family and all of the basically poor management that has gone into that organization for years. RG3 has been very vocal about how it was just not a well-run organization as a National Football franchise. Um, and yeah, the Saints are, they're playing with a backup quarterback. They trade a lot of their best players at the trade deadline, so they're in full rebuild mode. They're going to be hiring a new coach at the end of this year, and starting from scratch essentially. So they really need to hope that they can hit on a couple players. Derek Carr has been okay for them. He's been banged up all year. Uh, I think the one kind of bright spot out of this year is just that you're getting playing time for those rookie quarterbacks and seeing if you have anything in them and can maybe move off Derek going forward and clear some of that cap money. Outside of that, it's just been a bad season since basically week 5 when they were rolling off wins. Ever since then, they've just been hurt. Their coach got fired, and now they're playing with just for the paycheck at this point. And then one of the roughest games to actually watch from a viewer standpoint was the Ravens versus the Giants. Ravens get the 35-14 win. It was never competitive. I watched the game. I mean, Lamar Jackson threw 5 touchdowns against a team that's just really not good. To be frank, that there was never a point in that game that I was concerned that the Giants were going to win that game against the Ravens. That they're a bad team. They're flying planes over the stadium, calling for everybody's job, the owners to sell the team. Fans are wearing bags over their heads to the games saying sell the team. That the Giants are in disarray right now. They're really gonna. I would assume they're probably gonna move off of Dayball. I think they probably kind of have to. I think their fans will revolt otherwise. They don't have a ton of amazing talent, in my opinion. You got Neighbors, who's been kind of a hissy fit on the field every time he's out there, but he's an amazing wide receiver. And then you got a couple of defensive pass rushers like Brian Burns. But outside of that, you're going to have to increase some talent. These guys really regret letting Saquon Barkley go ball out with the Eagles, and you can't blame them because they've been bad all year. So good jobs by the Ravens. They kind of needed to get back on track after they lost some of their momentum essentially. So this was kind of a get right game for them. And then Cowboys versus Panthers. Cowboys get the 30-14 win. The momentum was just it was kind of paramount that the Cowboys win this game essentially. That wasn't a great viewing game. It's going to continue to hurt them long term because now it's just hurting their draft stock. They're not a Super Bowl team. They're playing with Cooper Rush right now. Like I would assume that Mike McCarthy's getting fired. I think long term this probably hurts them more than helps them. But it was a good team win. I mean, Panthers, they've been on a heater recently, and I thought Bryce Young still played okay, but yeah, it's just one of those games that was really just not. It's kind of similar to like the Ravens Giants game where it just wasn't a really good watch as a fan. You're watching basically backups in the NFL playing against each other. But one fun game was actually the Jets versus the Jags. I thought this was just further proof that Aaron Rodgers can still do it. He's been balling out. Obviously, Devontae Adams lifted that team on his back. I think he had 200 something yards. That you know, it just shows there's talent on this roster. I was convinced when the Jags went down and tied it up at the end of the fourth quarter, um, and then the Jets marched down and score. I was convinced that the defense was going to let them win, that the Jags were going to somehow pull it out. Mac Jones would make one or two stupid plays and they'd lose by a field goal or something. I have no confidence in that Jets defense, and that's crazy because the last couple years they've arguably been one of the best defenses in the league. Everybody is all up on Sauce Gardner's nuts, and he's played horrible this year. He's an average quarterback this year, especially by his standards. Um, but yeah, it was fun to watch offensively from the Jets, but I have no conviction that they were actually going to be able to beat the Jags at the end of that game. I was just waiting for them all to take everybody in the media just to pile on the Jets again and blame Aaron, even though Aaron's played really well the last couple of weeks. And then Dolphins versus Texans. Texans get the 20-12 win. The Dolphins just aren't very good. I mean, they kind of had a little bit of bad luck with the Tua injury thing. That definitely derailed their whole season, but he's back, and it's just been a dink and dunk offense. I've thought that Tyreek Hill has not played particularly well this year, which in that system, you kind of need Tyreek to produce, as well as Jalen Waddle, who's I thought played better. Um, but yeah, I think they really are going to have to invest in the offseason because they just I don't think they. I think they need to think about how they're constructed as a team because right this time of year, once it's starting to get cold, obviously this one they were in, I believe, a dome. I think they need to add a power aspect to their team because right now it's obviously all speed with Tyreek and Waddle, but and I think it's there whatever the running back name is, Devon Etienne, I think is his name. I think you need to add a power aspect just so you can kind of wear down that defense. Um, yeah, and then they overpaid Tua, in my opinion. I would never have given that contract that they gave him, especially with his injury history. It's similar to the Jags being tied to Trevor Lawrence. That I thought you saw a lot of, kind of B minus quarterbacks making that A to A plus money, and I think it's just gonna strap a lot of these teams in their rebuild attempt because you're sending a large portion of your salary cap to a player that's not elevating your team. They're just not necessarily hurting your team. And then one of the weirdest games of the week was the Colts versus the Broncos. Broncos get the 31-13 win. Um, and the Broncos had no momentum going in this game until Jonathan Taylor basically drops the ball on the half-yard line when he's walking in for a touchdown. Goes to the Broncos, and then they score. I believe it was like 18 unanswered points or something. That that game, I watched it, and I thought that the Colts were gonna blow out the Broncos. I thought they looked flat and unprepared after the bye week. Bo did not play well. Threw, I believe, three interceptions. That I thought that was kind of his rookie game. He just looked unprepared, nervous. He just didn't play great. And then our running back room at the Broncos is so bad that once McLaughlin kind of got nicked, and he's been our top running back, and he's still not been amazing. We really struggled to put together any offense until that second quarter. So it was just a weird game, but it's the first time since Super Bowl 50 that the Broncos have had a winning season. So um, yeah, we win one more game, and that the Broncos break that playoff drought that they've been in. So it's been fun to see Sean Payton have his fingers all over this. I think he's personally my coach of the year at this point. I think the only other one that you could argue is the Bills coach. I believe that's McDermott. I think that the game this week cost Dan Campbell the coach of the year in my opinion. Speaking of which, we'll go right into the Lions versus the Bills. Bills get the 48-42 win over the Lions, and the Lions made a dumb choice. I think they could have won that game, but Dan Campbell called an onside kick with like 9 minutes left. And with the new rule system, it's not a surprise. You have to declare it. I think it's the dumbest part of this new kickoff rule is declaring that you have to do it. And yeah, it cost them the game. And then they had a couple more injuries. The biggest one was David Montgomery. I heard I believe it was his knee is out probably for the season, unless maybe they make a Super Bowl run and he could come back a little quick. But that was part of their whole offense was the whole Sonic and Knuckles backfield with him and Jameer Gibbs. And now you're down to one of them, so it's going to increase his workload, which could arguably lead to a faster injury for him as well. And then they lost another D lineman that I think that they are limping into um, this playoff series, and their defense is so hurt that they could not have stopped any part of the Bills' offense. Even if these two somehow managed to meet in the Super Bowl, which is a possibility because they are two excellent teams, I don't think anybody would be picking the Lions to win that game because their defense could not stop a nosebleed this week, let alone Josh Allen, who I believe probably just solidified the MVP unless he gets hurt like first play of next week and can't finish the rest of the season. I think that's the only real way that he can't win the MVP. Unless, yeah, like there's crazy scenarios, like maybe Saquon runs for 600 yards or something crazy, like video game kind of stuff. Outside of that, I think you have to admit that Josh Allen is the MVP from this year, and so congrats to him. They're a weird team because they're a tough team to play, and then their defense really has not played great either. That they're getting into these big shootouts with every team where they're relying on Josh Allen to score 42 points, and so far he's done it. That I would be a little worried if I was a Bills fan going into the playoffs when you're playing in places like Kansas City or even Buffalo where it's cold and it's going to be just harder to get in those shootouts because this defense has just not been stopping people from scoring. So that is one area of concern I would have as a Bills fan. But I do think that you are seeing Josh Allen win the MVP at this point in this year. And then Eagles versus Steelers. Eagles get the 27-13 win. It was Jalen Hurts' best game of the season by far, in my opinion, especially with all the noise around the A.J. Brown gossip and all that stuff. They definitely put an emphasis on throwing the ball this week. The Steelers were so paranoid about stopping Saquon Barkley that they totally forgot A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are two really good receivers. And Jalen Smith they can still throw the ball. That I think it showed that the Steelers are very reliant on George Pickens as well in their offense. I think that was the thing that they've forgotten about is, Russell Wilson at this point in his career, he's not a franchise quarterback. He's only as good as the players around him. And when you're missing your top receiver, I thought their running game has been suspect all year. That they couldn't generate a lot of offense against a pretty solid Eagles defense. That going into the playoffs, I think the Eagles are a real contender this year with Saquon and then how good their defense has played. I think that they are a scary team, and I wouldn't really want to play them because it's going to probably be in Philadelphia. So, Cardinals versus Patriots. Cardinals get the 30-17 win. This was a must-win for the Cardinals. They've not looked great the last couple weeks. Kyler has not played well. Patriots obviously aren't really in the playoff picture, but they're still kind of a tough team to beat. They play really hard for Gerard Mayo, and then Drake May has played really well for a rookie. That they're a tough team, but Cardinals really needed this one, get some momentum going, try to make that last late season push for the playoffs, and they did that. So props to them. And then Chargers versus Bucks. Bucks put a whipping on the Chargers this week with the 40-17 win. Baker Mayfield has totally reclaimed his career from the NFL because he was on that borderline a couple years ago before he signed with the Rams when he was playing in Carolina, who just eats up players. of basically getting kicked out of the NFL. And ever since he went to the Bucks, he has frankly been one of the best quarterbacks in the league. That they put a stomping on the Chargers after the first couple quarters. It just wasn't close. I think you're starting to see that the Chargers are still kind of in that rebuild mode. They just have a really good quarterback and coach that they're able to cover some of their deficiencies, which is primarily skill players. Their wide receiving core is just not, it's not where it needs to be to compete at that top level, even though you have that excellent coach and quarterback. And then J.K. Dobbins has been in and out with injuries that when you're missing those players, it's really hard to compete at that with those top teams. And I think you saw that today, that they haven't really been able to put up a lot of points this year. So they were trying to win these close matchups where it's, one score games. It's kind of like trying to play the Chiefs style, that at some point it's going to catch up to you. And this was one of those games where they got humbled a little bit. And then Sunday Night Football was Packers versus the Seahawks. Packers get the 30-13 win. I think next year the Packers are going to be a team to be scared of. I think this year they could make another kind of little miracle run. I wouldn't consider it a miracle if they made it all the way, but I think they're still a little young. So I think they're where Detroit was like last year, where in about a year's time, nobody's going to want to see them at any point in the playoffs. All of those players are coming into their own. After next year, though, when you have to start re-signing people, I think that you're going to see a possible drop-off. But Matt LaFleur has done an excellent job of coaching that roster. They can beat anybody. The only reason they lose is when Jordan Love pulls Jameis Winston and just makes silly throws. He's trying to force balls in and turns the ball over. Outside of that, their receiving core is really good, and then Josh Jacobs was a great signing for them. I like them coming into this game. I don't personally trust Geno Smith at all. I think he's got probably one more year with the Seahawks while they're trying to find that young quarterback of the future to kind of sit behind him. Kind of where Drake May was this year. The problem is they're going to be a little too good to get those top couple of guys, so they're going to have to develop somebody or trade for someone or do something like that. But they're still, they have really good skill players, and then their core or their DB core is vastly underrated in my opinion. When they played my Broncos, they flew all over the place. They tackle. That they're a tough team, and obviously playing in Seattle, it's a tough place to play. But yeah, with when Geno went out and with that knee injury, I think they kind of accepted that they were going to lose that game. They were already behind. Geno goes out. Sam Howell comes in as backup, and it just didn't really work out once all that went down. And then there's two Monday Night Football games right now that are happening. That is going to be the Bears versus the Vikings, and then the Falcons, the Raiders. The Falcons really need this one. They're nearing that phase where it's going to get real loud playing Kirk Cousins versus Michael Penix Jr. Kirk's not played well. He's started to look like a 40-year-old guy that tore his Achilles, basically. Aaron Rodgers is looking younger than him, if that says anything. And Aaron is older and also had the same injury. That you really need Kirk to play well this week and basically get a win against the Raiders, who has just been a joke of a franchise recently. Like I said it last time that I believe they are the worst run organization in the NFL right now. They've made no attempt to basically address their quarterback deficiencies for the last couple of years. That they're in play for that first overall pick. And I there's really no excuse for the Falcons to lose this. If they lose this, I don't think that Kirk will start the rest of the year, barring an injury to like Michael Penix if they put him in. And then Bears versus Vikings. It's in division, so that's always weird. So you never know when like the Bills or the Bears could rattle off a win just because it's a division opponent. But this one should be the Vikings getting the win here. Offensively, they're just a powerhouse. With Aaron Jones has been a great pickup for them, and then I think they have a top two, arguably. receiving core in the league with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. Sam Darnold's been playing really well. I think it's going to be really loud in the offseason on whether or not you want to re-sign him because you're rolling the dice with J.J. McCarthy. He's hurt his knee several times. You've never seen him play a down in the NFL. That I would actually consider trading J.J. McCarthy and re-signing Sam Darnold. But the ones kind of positive of re-signing or letting Sam Darnold walk and rolling with JJ is then you're on a rookie contract. So you can then allocate that money to elsewhere, which you are probably going to have to start thinking about signing Jordan Addison. I think he's got one more year before he's eligible for a receiver contract, which obviously are not cheap. And he's he could fetch a lot of money in that open market if he leaves too. That I think that is one of the few benefits of rolling with JJ McCarthy. But as a fan of a team that has been looking for quarterback for a long time, be careful when you find one, not keeping them because there's not as many out there as you think that are going to be able to put up the numbers you want to see. But yeah, they're two fun good games that should be super entertaining, and we'll come back and talk about them when they're done. So thank you for coming. This has been Jack Paisley, the Sports Casual.